there's this very strange. I'll just give you this one. Terry Christian, who's always popping up with a horrific tweet. He put initial post I don't actually have here about how it was an immigrant and what people say to that now. And then someone said, well, what about this? You did your research well, didn't you? Pointing to Stephen Crean here, and he said, yep. Where was he when the train pulled in again? I mean, I'll tell you where he was, Terry. I answered it here. The answer is on the floor, bleeding out because he just stood up to a massive bloke with a knife, despite being on his own with no weapon. There's scum, and then there's Terry Christian. I think it's completely valid because he came up against a 6'1" guy with a massive knife. And you're like, oh, yeah, but what have you done for me lately? Where were you when it was pulling in? Well, yeah, he was at that point on the floor, nearly passed out, losing blood, you absolute idiot.
Yeah, I mean, Terry Christian's a supercilious, ultra-arrogant, left-wing populist who indulges in this sort of stuff and is only interested in the narrative. And he has a privilege. He lives in an area, I'm not going to say where, that's not my game, but it's easily identifiable by tweets online, that's 96, 97% white. Virtually zero of any of the nasty stuff that people are having to deal with in inner cities. And he's incredibly privileged that he can commentate on this stuff from this ultra-left populist perspective and never really have to worry about dealing with any of the consequences of ignoring it in the way that he does. There's plenty of Terry Christians online. Terry Christian's obviously made a career of being a bit of a dickhead, and I assume it's worked very well for him because you've been doing it for a considerable amount of time.
Why change what's working so well?
Yeah, exactly, and it is working well for him. And Terry is so desperate for us not to see what's happening that he is incredibly comfortable to be one of the UK's biggest dickheads online. It's absolutely. It doesn't. There's no way he's going to take the post that's
official, by the way. He won an award, UK's biggest dickhead, 1997. Won it again in 2003 and 2008.
Yeah, and that's his modus operandi. That's exactly what he's decided is his path in life. And I'm not here to say that Terry Christian shouldn't speak or everything that Terry Christian does is evil. You can make your own mind up about that. But what people like Terry Christian do is they obfuscate to a dangerous level. So they are so entrenched in their own narrative and ideology that even when such a hideous, harrowing event takes place, he's unable to see the humanity of it. He can only see it through the perspective of his ideology. And therefore, you just get these diatribes. And of course, his tweet yesterday was ratioed by probably about 60 or 70 people. I even talked about it on the telly last night because I was on the US show for GB News and Bev had seen my tweet. And it's like, people can't quite believe, normal people can't quite believe, in the same way they can't quite believe people that they call far right. They also can't quite believe someone like Terry Christian, who's incredibly far left. And we always associate populism with the right, but this is the epicenter of left populism. It's just clickbait. Him and Narinder just clickbait tweet day in, day out, and it works for them. But let's not forget that at times it can become very dangerous.
Yeah, I was just looking for the original tweet, which I can't find, but you get the idea what it was. I'll share this one instead, which is the same thing from Kevin Maguire. So Kevin Maguire says, so the UK train attack hero, not the suspect, is the migrant born abroad and he's a Muslim. The racists on here will be gutted. Few problems with that. If you really want to play this game, Paul, Kevin, whatever. I was going to say, Paul, I'm blaming you. I always, the reason I said Paul is I keep thinking Kevin Maguire is Paul Mason, and I can't convince my brain that they're different.
They are the same person.
But if you want to play this game, is this really the racist gutted? This is the guy that did it, Kevin. Is that really like one in the eye for the racist? I mean, I don't really understand your point. So, it's a big black guy wielding a knife. It's quite strange, but they're arguing, well, this guy's British born and the hero was Algerian. So this is very strange. Callum did a funny reply here to Kevin. How British people think you grow the GDP. We need to import migrants to take the stabbings for us. We need to import migrants to do the stabbings for us. So it's a loot. And this is a very controversial thing, but so there's this idea that that everyone on the right thought it was Muslims. So, Paul, just to give you an idea as well, as the kind of people responding to this, we have this guy, Richard, here. And the only reason I know about this guy is because he replied to me with something dumb the other day. So I started looking at his profile, and he had FBPE and Blue Sky in bio, which is like the full set. And Tom Harwood had said, oh, it's this Anthony Williams guy is one who actually did this. That was the guy with the knife. So Richard here replies, so not a terrorist incident and not linked to Islamism. Thoughts and prayers for all those disappointed reform supporters who hoped that it was. So their glee here is extraordinary. Do they care about the victims, or do they just care about owning the reform supporters? And what's really weird, and this is an uncomfortable point, is that I never thought it was going to be a Muslim personally, because the type of attack, it could have been, but it didn't seem that typical of an Islamist attack. I thought it was going to be pretty much exactly what it was. The only question mark is, is it someone just arrived? Is it more of a Ruda Cabana type person who they'll all say is a Welsh choir boy, but we know isn't? And it was sort of in that kind of category. And the uncomfortable thing is they don't realize what they're doing here, which is actually making the point.
Exactly.
Because I'll just share this in case anyone thinks I'm being a big racist. Because this is Rafe Hadal Manku. He says, yes, the stabbing is about immigration. Britain needs an honest conversation about the high degree of mental illness in certain ethnic communities. Black people are 4 times more likely to be detained under the Mental Health Act than whites. Black men are more likely to have a psychotic disorder in the last year than white men. Black people are diagnosed with schizophrenia at a rate of approximately 2.4 to 4 times higher than white people. So, and he goes on and talks about, cousin marriage among British Pakistanis. There's different groups. I mean, and even some people, even sort of lefties there was a lefty girl that said, oh, I'm on the train and don't, not scared like these gammons or something very distasteful. And she said, well, and then people replied, she said, no, it's about mental health, and it is about mental health, but it's also about, some other things. Who are the people we have in the country? And there's some people claim that white people are overrepresented for certain crimes, which I probably can't mention on YouTube necessarily, involving children. I don't know if that's actually true, but if it is, I'm happy to, go into that as well. But let's just look at the reality. So this is a very strange thing. If it's not, it's not a Muslim. You're all because. I'll just share this one from Shabana Mahmood. After last night's horrific attack, my thoughts today are with the victims. Blah blah. She's just the standard. Very serious. But I say blah blah because I want to get to this bit down the bottom, which is we now know the attack is not being treated as terrorism, and that 2 British-born British nationals has been arrested. One of them turned out to be a mistake. So she's going on about British-born. I said they haven't yet realized British-born is actually worse for them, meaning sort of, the left, or the regime. It suggests integration is a myth, or at best takes a lot longer than we've been told. So when you talk about British-born, they think, oh, we're winning the argument. Look at that, you see, racist, and it's not immigrants. Well, no, it's not immigrants, as in people who've just arrived, but clearly there's something about Ruda Cabana coming from Rwanda, and we don't know enough about this guy yet, but it's clearly there's not magic soil. So people come from very different cultures. You say, oh, well, they're British born, so you've lost the argument. It's like, well, no, the civic nationalists have lost the argument, who pretend that once you arrive in Britain and you adopt the 5 British values invented 10 minutes ago, you become British. Actually, you're playing into really the kind of argument of people who say, culture doesn't work like that. So it's strange they think that's a big win when it's British born. I don't see it like that at all. What do you think?
Yeah, look, there's a lot of racism inadvertent within those type of comments. They just don't see the own goals that they're continually scoring. This doesn't in any way prove that multiculturalism works. In fact, it quite proves the opposite. I had this discussion the other night, and a lot of people mistake multiculturalism purely with the color of skin or religion. I mean, there was a guy on that train who was of a different culture, but had assimilated to the point where he was willing to stand up for our culture and put himself in harm's way, very serious harm's way, as it turns out, and God willing, he has a full recovery, because he believes in the culture and because he believes in the safety of that culture. The guy,
and because he's a heroic individual, which we can get into.
Of course, and we accept that, and there's no problem with that whatsoever. The attacker, however, is of a different culture. He's of the culture that thinks this is okay. And it's not just about mental health here. There's a whole bunch of things going on. Yes, there's a disproportionate amount mental health issues among certain demographics. But in this case, he's not just doing this randomly. He's doing this because he is following a pattern of behavior or an ideology or a way of life that he believes is right and overrules any other cultural way of life, of which just happened to be on that train or in that barber shop or on that DLR train over the weekend. And he hasn't been stopped. And we keep saying things like the police arrived quickly. They didn't arrive quickly. Very interestingly, I've taken to reading some pretty mainstream European news outlets, just things that have come up on my feed and read. One of the reasons I started reading them is I suddenly realized that the center-left European broader view is exactly the same as you and I, Nick. If you read a European view on what took place on that train on Saturday, they say exactly the same things as we do. They don't say what the left are saying in the UK. They say things about the perpetrator's skin color, ethnicity, cultural background being withheld, communications being thwarted, making sure that online stuff is controlled so that we don't disturb the narrative. These are coming from center-left commentators.
You sure you haven't been reading AFD Weekly or something?
I've not been reading AFD Weekly at all. I've been reading very standard
National
stuff.
Valley News. No, okay.
Things like LRT, which is actually which is the Lithuanian equivalent of the BBC.
You're saying they don't share our particular parochial manias, a bit like how Tommy Robinson is treated fairly normally in North America.
I'm saying exactly that. I'm saying that a lot of these countries, by the way, are very proud to be part of the European Union, but equally proud to have their own sovereignty and patriotism. Now, I would argue that they perhaps don't. Without the European Union, they are not as strong as the UK can be without the European Union, and they are stronger within it. I understand that some of them are up, are on the flank with Russia, so they do need NATO and European support. I totally understand that, but because they're not afraid to be nationalistic or patriotic towards their country, and many of them have been through the terrors of communism in our living history, they understand that stuff like this leads to some very dangerous things, and that they're astonished by the way the government control this, astonished by the way these things are allowed to proliferate on a very, very regular basis. But most of their political views would be considered centre-left, nowhere near the right. We are not alone in this. We are just being gaslit day after day after day because this isn't stopping, and they don't know how to stop it, Nick.
Great point, Paul. Yeah, we're not the weird ones for just saying what's going on here. You're absolutely right. And this very weird narrative now, we all have to get involved in picking sides about this horrific event. But this is where we are. So let me just share David Yelland, journalist, former editor of The Sun, actually. He says, bloody Algerians coming over here, saving scores of British rail travellers from being stabbed to death. And it's like, why? And then Andy here replies, an Algerian asylum seeker stabbed Stephen Oak in 2003. Another funded a terror plot for Stockholm from the UK. Another battered his girlfriend and sexually assaulted the officer who arrested him. I mean, they're just a few you could use. The point is, I mean, if you really want to go there, one, it's the guy with the knife wasn't exactly one. We know straight away who it's going to be, don't we? We know it's not going to be a woman. So props to Jess Phillips for her men narrative. We know it's going to be a man. So it's not going to be a middle-aged white woman, is it? Women can't physically do it. I'm not saying they would anyway. We know it's not going to be a Chinese bloke, if we're honest.
We know it's not going to be someone dressed like you or I are now.
Right. We just kind of know roughly. There's a few different groups. Yes, it can be Islamist. And if it's not that, there's a few other things everyone's thinking. And it is those things. So, but here's my point. So if you want to really go there with Yelland here, it's like, yeah, okay. So someone who's basically from another background has done this. And then it's been countered by a heroic person who happens to be Algerian. Okay, well, that puts us back to sort of 0-0 or sort of level, but 1-1, I guess, is more accurate. But with 10 people seriously injured and with everyone now terrified of trains, it's not exactly a win, is it? So it's like, if you really want to play that game, it's not exactly a win, but okay. But I mean, go on, what you're going to say.
No, I think they look at us and believe that what we really want is for this to continue and for it to continually be someone of color or someone of an Islamist background so that we can continue with our crusade against these people. That's the first mistake they make. What we want is none of it whatsoever. None of it whatsoever. And people to assimilate into a culture that believes this is bad. The last thing you hear from the terror Christians and any of these other David Yellens, the last thing you hear from them is they want to see it stopped entirely. If every tweet they said, I want to see this stopped entirely, but here's my observation, then maybe there'd be more of a discussion to be had. But as soon as you see something like this, you're like, oh, okay. Yeah. You're no different. You're absolutely this projection. It's pure projection. You imagine this devil, and now you are projecting your own devil onto your tweet to prove that you are no different. They don't want to stop anything. They want it to continue because they don't want to address the issues. We talk about the train. It is terrifying to go on train. I use a train at least once a week to go up to London. Often drive. I prefer to drive. Less terrorism involved, and obviously I've got control of my journey, and not always the same with a train. But let's just make it very practical. Take all humans out of it. If that train was breaking down or became very unsafe because of one part, and it was continually that part that was causing accidents and safety issues, you would address that part. There'd be no emotion. There'd be no sentient humans involved, and you would just address that and you would fix it. That's exactly the same as this issue. If we can take just a little bit of the emotion out of it and admit that it's always a certain type of person, we will very quickly start dealing with the problem.
Yeah, and whatever that type of person is, there's various cases when it comes to cousin marriage, as Rafe says, that's a certain group. And there's different groups that have different propensities. And if we're just honest about that, like you say, and the other thing is immigration. And if Yellen thinks this is a win, well, you have to stack it against all immigration. Of course, an individual can be heroic, but you have to look at it statistically, as Andy's doing there. Just because one Algerian can be heroic doesn't mean, like Paul Embry puts it well here, what is actually the purpose of statements like this? If they mean that some immigrants are brave and honorable people, so therefore we should stop debating immigration or raising concerns over our broken borders, then they should say so. If not, what point are they making? Thank you, Paul, because what point are they
Paul
making?
Embry, by the way.
He's good. Yeah, he's good. He's sort of really sensible. He's sensible. I mean, what point are they making? Because if Yellen's right, oh, well, one Algerian did a heroic thing. Yeah, okay, great. We know individuals can do that. Does that mean we don't care about the thousands of girls raped and tortured by people who arguably shouldn't have been in the country, or people who we were very scared to acknowledge a certain propensity in their particular group? Does it mean we should put up with Rudy Cabana or this guy now who stabbed people on his face? No, it doesn't. We need to understand who these people are, where they're coming from, and if it is sort of second and third generation, then we need to understand what's going on with that as well. But what's your point, Yellen? Like, yes, one guy was a hero, absolutely. And so was Stephen Crean, by the way. So also, where's your tweet about that? Maybe he's got one, I don't know. But it's like, yes, two individuals were heroes, one English, Irish parentage, and one Algerian. Fine. No, we don't, like you say, we don't believe that can't happen. So they're in a kind of straw man. It's always a straw man in their mind anyway.
Yeah, and they're arguing with themselves. So anyone who's liking that is all part of the same psychosis. That they're kind of arguing with themselves that, oh, look, we're just going to pat each other on the back because we've made what we believe is an interesting satirical point that shines a light back onto this right-wing fascism that's so prevalent in the UK right now, which of course it's not. There is one underlying fact throughout all of these subjects that we've discussed, and we have to discuss them every week. It's unbelievable that we do, and it's a new one every week. Yeah. We've already forgotten about the stuff we were talking about last week. We're talking about this stuff now.
Yeah, and I'm sure guy gets stabbed walking his dog. And now this week, it's train stabbing.